What if I told you Heinz beans are cooked inside the can you buy? Not before, not after, inside. Once the lid is sealed, the beans finish cooking under intense heat and pressure. In this video, you'll see how raw beans travel from farm to tin and why this strange method is the secret behind that familiar taste. The history that started it all. The Heinz Beanz story begins way back in 1886, but not in Britain like you might think. Henry John Heinz, an American entrepreneur with a serious eye for quality food, first started selling baked beans in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. The man was already famous for his pickles and ketchup, but he saw something special in these humble beans. Back then, baked beans were considered a luxury item in America, usually homemade and time-consuming to prepare. Heinz changed all that by offering them in convenient cans, making what was once a Sunday special into something anyone could enjoy any day of the week. But this is where it gets interesting for us Brits. Heinz beans didn't cross the Atlantic until 1886, when they were first imported to England through the famous Fortnum and Mason department store in London. Yes, you read that right. The same beans we now grab for £2 at Tesco started out being sold in one of London's poshest shops. They were marketed as an exotic American delicacy, and wealthy Victorians couldn't get enough of them. Imagine walking into Fortnum's in your finest Victorian garb just to buy a can of beans. That's how special they were back then. The real game changer came in 1928 when Heinz opened their first UK factory in Harlesden, North London. Suddenly, beans weren't just an imported luxury anymore. They were being made right here on British soil, and the factory churned out millions of cans to meet the growing demand. Brits fell head over heels in love with them, and the timing couldn't have been better either. The Second World War was looming, and when rationing hit, Heinz beans became an absolute lifesaver. They were nutritious, filling, affordable, and had a long shelf life. The government even promoted them as an essential part of the wartime diet, helping families get through some of the toughest years in British history. By 1959, Heinz had outgrown the London factory and moved operations to Kit Green in Wigan, Lancashire. This facility is now the largest food processing plant in Europe, and we're talking absolutely massive here. The Kit Green factory sits on a site that's bigger than 50 football pitches combined, sprawling across the Lancashire landscape like a small town dedicated entirely to beans. Today, this single factory produces over 1.5 million cans of beans every single day. That's more than 500 million cans every year, and around half of those stay right here in the UK, while the rest get exported to bean lovers around the world. The factory itself is a marvel of modern food production. It's been continuously upgraded and expanded since it first opened, with new production lines added regularly to keep up with demand. The building stretches across the landscape with multiple production halls, warehouses, and quality control facilities all working together in perfect harmony. Walking through the factory is like stepping into a world where everything revolves around one simple mission: making the perfect can of beans. The simple but perfect ingredients. One of the reasons Heinz Beanz has remained so popular for over a century is because the recipe is surprisingly simple. There's no mysterious list of chemicals you can't pronounce, no weird additives that make you question what you're eating. Just real, honest ingredients that come together to create that distinctive taste we all know and love. First up, the star of the show is the haricot bean. These small, white, oval-shaped beans are specifically chosen for their creamy texture and mild flavour that soaks up the sauce beautifully. Heinz sources these beans from farms across North America, primarily from the USA and Canada, where the climate and soil conditions are perfect for growing high-quality haricots. The beans need to be the right size, the right colour, and the right quality before they even make it onto a ship bound for Britain. Heinz inspectors check every single batch that arrives at the factory to make sure they meet the strict standards that have been in place for decades. The relationship between Heinz and these North American bean farmers goes back generations. Many of the farms have been supplying Heinz for 50 years or more, with farming techniques and bean varieties refined over decades to produce exactly what Heinz needs. The beans are harvested at the peak of ripeness, dried, sorted, and then shipped across the Atlantic Atlantic in massive cargo containers. The journey from farm to factory can take several weeks, but the dried beans remain in perfect condition throughout the voyage. Then there's the tomato sauce, which is where the real magic happens. The sauce is made from tomatoes, obviously, but also includes sugar, salt, spirit vinegar, modified corn flour for thickness, and a special blend of spices and herb extracts. This spice blend is actually a closely guarded secret that Heinz has never revealed, and it's one of the reasons why people who try to copy the recipe at home never quite nail that authentic Heinz taste. You can get close, sure, but there's always something missing that keeps you coming back to the real thing. The tomatoes used in the sauce come from multiple sources around the world, selected for their sweetness and acidity levels. Heinz has strict specifications for the tomatoes, requiring a certain balance of sugars and acids to create that distinctive tangy sweetness we associate with the brand. The tomatoes are processed into paste at their source and then shipped to the Kit Green factory, where they're turned into the sauce. The sugar content in Heinz Beanz has been a topic of conversation over the years, especially as people have become more health conscious. A standard can contain about 5 grams of sugar per 100 grams of beans, which is roughly 1 teaspoon. Heinz has actually reduced the sugar content by more than 30% since 2016, making them a bit healthier without sacrificing too much of that sweet, tangy flavour we love. It's a delicate balance because take out too much sugar and the beans taste flat and boring, but they've managed to find that sweet spot where the taste stays familiar but the nutritional profile improves. Water is another crucial ingredient because it helps create the sauce and cook the beans to that perfect tender consistency. The water used at the Kit Green factory goes through multiple filtration and treatment processes to ensure it's completely pure and free from any minerals or contaminants that could affect the taste. And finally, there's a tiny amount of modified corn flour which acts as a thickening agent to give the sauce its signature glossy, clingy texture that coats every bean beautifully. Without it, you just have watery tomato liquid instead of that rich sauce that makes beans on toast such a satisfying meal. The fascinating process from bean to can. Now let's get into the really good stuff, the part where raw, hard white beans transform into the saucy, tender orange gems we know and love. The process is actually more complex than you might think, and it all happens with incredible speed and precision that would make your head spin if you saw it in person. Everything starts when massive trucks arrive at the Kit Green factory loaded with dried haricot beans that have travelled thousands of miles from North American farms. These beans have already been sorted and cleaned at their origin, but Heinz doesn't take any chances. The beans go through another rigorous inspection process where they're checked for size, colour and any defects. Any beans that don't meet the grade get rejected immediately. And we're talking about millions of beans being inspected with the quality control team not messing around one bit. The inspection process uses a combination of human eyes and advanced technology. Optical sorting machines can scan thousands of beans per second, identifying and removing any that are discoloured, damaged, or the wrong size. Quality control workers also manually inspect samples throughout the day, cutting open random beans to check their internal quality and moisture content. Once approved, the dried beans are sent to massive storage silos where they wait until they're needed for production. These silos are temperature and humidity controlled to keep the beans in perfect condition, sometimes for weeks or even months until their number comes up. The silos are huge cylindrical structures that tower over the factory floor, each one capable of holding thousands of tons of beans. Automated systems monitor the bean inventory constantly, ensuring there's always enough supply to keep the production lines running without interruption. When it's go time, the beans are moved to soaking tanks, and this is a critical step because dried beans are rock hard and need to absorb water before they can be cooked properly. The beans soak in temperature-controlled water for several hours until they've roughly doubled in size and softened up enough for the next stage. The soaking time is carefully calculated based on the age and moisture content of the beans, with older beans needing slightly longer soaking times than fresher ones. After soaking, cooking, the beans are transferred to huge blanching tanks where they're partially cooked in boiling water. This blanching process serves multiple purposes that all work together to create the perfect bean. It softens the beans further. It helps remove any remaining impurities or dirt that might have snuck through, and it also deactivates certain enzymes that could affect the final texture if left alone. The blanching doesn't fully cook the beans though, and they're only about 70% done at this point because the final cooking happens in the can itself. The blanching tanks are enormous stainless steel vessels that can process several tons of beans at once. The beans are constantly agitated during blanching to ensure even cooking, and temperature sensors monitor the water to make sure it stays at exactly the right temperature. After blanching, the beans are quickly drained and moved immediately to the filling lines while they're still hot. Timing is crucial here because if the beans cool down too much, they could affect the final product quality. Here's where things get really interesting, and this is something most people don't know. Do you know that Heinz actually cooks the beans inside the sealed cans? Most people assume the beans are fully cooked first and then put into cans, but that's not how it works at all. This cooking in the can method is actually what gives Heinz beans their unique texture and flavor that you can't replicate at home. The beans finish cooking in their own sauce, which means they absorb all those delicious flavors while they're steaming away in their little tin homes. The sauce penetrates every bean and the flavors meld together in a way that just doesn't happen if you cook them separately and then combine them. It's a technique that Heinz perfected over many decades of trial and error, and it remains one of the key secrets to why their beans taste so distinctively good. While the beans are being blanched, another part of the factory is busy making the famous tomato sauce in massive steel vats the size of swimming pools. These vats are incredible pieces of equipment, with heating elements, mixing paddles, and precise temperature controls. The vats are filled with tomato paste, water, sugar, vinegar, and all those secret spices, and the sauce is mixed and heated to a specific temperature to make sure everything dissolves and combines perfectly. The consistency has to be exactly right because too thick and it won't coat the beans properly. Too thin and it'll be watery and disappointing. The sauce making process is monitored constantly by technicians who check the viscosity, acidity, sugar content, and temperature multiple times throughout the batch. Samples are taken every few minutes and tested in an on-site laboratory to ensure everything is within the tight specifications. If anything is even slightly off, adjustments are made immediately. The sauce is kept hot and constantly stirred to prevent any settling or separation until it's ready to be pumped to the filling lines. Next comes the filling process. And this is where the factory really shows off its incredible automation that looks like something out of a science fiction film. The partially cooked beans and the hot sauce are fed into a high-speed canning line where empty cans zoom along a conveyor belt at ridiculous speeds. Precision machines fill each one with the exact right amount of beans and sauce, and the ratio is carefully calculated so that every can has the perfect balance. Not too many beans with not enough sauce, and not too much sauce drowning the beans where you're basically eating tomato soup with a few beans floating around. The filling machines are engineering marvels. They can dispense exactly the right amount of beans and sauce into each can with incredible accuracy, even at high speeds. The machines use volumetric filling systems that measure out precise quantities, and weight checkers immediately after filling ensure every can is within the acceptable weight range. Cans that are too light or too heavy are automatically rejected and sent back for reprocessing. The filling happens so fast that your eyes can barely keep up with individual cans. The machines can fill, on average, about 1,200 cans per minute on a single line, and there are multiple lines running simultaneously throughout the massive factory floor. That means thousands and thousands of cans being filled every single minute of every single day, creating a constant stream of beans that flows through the factory like an orange river. Once filled, the cans zip along to the sealing station, where lids are placed on top and sealed shut with incredible precision. The seal has to be absolutely perfect because any tiny gap could let in bacteria or air, which would spoil the beans and potentially make someone sick. The sealing machines apply just the right amount of pressure to create an airtight seal without damaging the can or the lid. Each seal is inspected immediately after it's made, with reject cans being removed from the line automatically if any defect is detected. The sealed cans then head straight to the retort, which is basically a giant pressure cooker that looks like something you'd find in a submarine. Here's another cool fact for you that explains why canned food is so reliable. The retort process is what makes canned food shelf-stable for years without needing refrigeration or preservatives. The sealed cans are loaded into massive pressurized steam chambers where they're cooked at temperatures around 121 degrees Celsius for a specific amount of time. This intense heat kills any bacteria, including the really nasty ones like botulism that could otherwise make you seriously ill. It also finishes cooking the beans to perfection, allowing them to soak up the sauce, become tender and creamy, and develop that characteristic Heinz flavor that's been beloved for generations. The retort chambers are huge industrial pressure vessels that can hold thousands of cans at once. The cans are loaded into metal baskets and then wheeled into the retort on tracks. Once the door is sealed, steam is pumped in to build up pressure and temperature. The cooking cycle is controlled by sophisticated computers that monitor temperature, pressure, and time with extreme precision. Even a few degrees or a few seconds difference could affect the safety or quality of the final product, so the controls are incredibly strict. The cooking time in the retort is carefully calculated down to the exact second. Too short and the beans might not be fully cooked or properly sterilized, which could lead to spoilage or worse. Too long and they'll turn to mush, losing that perfect texture that makes Heinz beans so satisfying to eat. Heinz has perfected this timing after more than a century of making beans, and they've got it down to an absolute science. When the cooking is done, the cans need to cool down before they can be handled, so they're sprayed with cool water to bring the temperature down quickly and safely. The cooling process is just as important as the cooking because if it happens too slowly, the beans could continue cooking from residual heat and become overcooked. Once cooled, every single can goes through a quality check that would make even the strictest teacher proud. Automated systems check that each can is properly sealed, that it's the right weight, and that there are no dents or defects that could compromise the contents. The cans pass under electronic sensors that can detect even microscopic leaks in the seal. They also go through metal detectors to ensure no metal fragments from the machinery have accidentally fallen into any cans during production. Random cans are also pulled from the line throughout the day and opened up for manual inspection. Quality control workers check the color, taste, texture, and consistency to make sure every batch meets the Heinz standard that's been maintained since Victorian times. These workers are highly trained and experienced, able to detect even subtle variations in the product. They taste multiple samples every hour, checking that the beans are the right tenderness, the sauce is the right consistency, and the flavor profile matches the target exactly. Do you know how many quality checks a single can of Heinz beans goes through before it reaches your local shop? Over 20 different inspections and tests happen throughout the entire production process, from the moment the raw beans arrive to the second the finished cans leave the warehouse. That's why you can grab any can of Heinz beans from any shop in the country and know it's going to taste exactly the same as the last one you had, whether you bought it in London or Manchester or Edinburgh. After passing all the checks, the cans move to the labeling section where that iconic blue and turquoise label gets wrapped around each one. The labels are applied at lightning speed by machines that can handle thousands of cans per hour, creating a blur of color as they whiz past. The labeling machines are incredibly precise, ensuring each label is perfectly centered and securely attached. Any cans with crooked or damaged labels are automatically removed from the line because Heinz knows that presentation matters just as much as what's inside. Then the labelled cans are packed into cardboard cases, stacked onto pallets, and stored in massive warehouses that stretch as far as the eye can see until they're shipped out to supermarkets, corner shops, and cafes across the country. The warehouse uses automated storage and retrieval systems that can move pallets around with robotic precision, ensuring that older stock gets shipped out first to maintain freshness. Distribution trucks arrive constantly to collect pallets of beans, taking them to regional distribution centres and then onto shops where they'll finally end up in someone's shopping basket. The mind-blowing numbers. Let's talk about scale for a second, because the numbers coming out of the Kit Green factory are absolutely bonkers and hard to wrap your head around. Remember how we said they produce 1.5 million cans every single day? That means in just 1 hour, they're pumping out over 60,000 cans. Every minute, about 1,000 cans are being filled, sealed, cooked, and labelled in a never-ending cycle. It's a non-stop operation that runs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, only stopping for essential maintenance that gets scheduled months in advance. To put that in perspective, if you lined up all the cans of Heinz Beanz made in just 1 year at Kit Green, they would stretch from London to Sydney, Australia, and back again. That's literally going around half the planet twice just to lay out 1 year's worth of production. The factory uses about 500,000 tons of ingredients every year, including beans, tomatoes, and other components that all have to be sourced, transported, and processed with military precision. The factory also employs over 900 people who work in shifts to keep everything running smoothly around the clock. They go from quality control specialists to engineers, machine operators, to logistics, coordinators. It takes a small army to keep those beans flowing. Many of these workers have been with Heinz for decades, some starting fresh out of school and staying until retirement, passing down their knowledge and expertise to new generations of bean makers. There's genuine pride in working at the Heinz factory, and you can hear it in the way employees talk about the product they help create. Heinz beans are so popular in the UK that British people consume more baked beans per person than any other country in the world. We eat approximately 2 million cans of baked beans every single day across the nation. That's 2 million breakfasts, lunches and dinners featuring those little orange beauties. If you do the math, that means the average British person eats about 18 cans of baked beans per year, which is significantly more than Americans or Australians or anyone else for that matter. The brand has become so embedded in British culture that it's hard to imagine life without it. Beans on toast is practically a national dish at this point, right up there with fish and chips or a Sunday roast. Students survive on it during exam season. Busy parents rely on it for quick dinners after long work days, and even fancy restaurants have started putting gourmet spins on it with fancy sourdough and expensive cheese. The humble can of Heinz Beanz has transcended its working class roots to become a cultural icon that crosses all social boundaries. Why Heinz Beanz remains king. So what is it about Heinz Beanz that keeps us coming back generation after generation, choosing them over cheaper supermarket alternatives time and time again? Part of it is definitely nostalgia, and there's no denying that powerful emotional connection. Many of us grew up eating Heinz Beanz, and that taste brings back childhood memories of simple, comforting meals shared with family. It's one of those foods that can transport you back to being 7 years old, sitting at your nan's kitchen table. But it's more than just nostalgia at play here, because plenty of nostalgic foods disappear once people grow up and their tastes mature. The consistency is a huge factor in the brand's enduring success. You know exactly what you're getting every single time you crack open a can, whether it was made on a Monday morning or a Saturday night. The texture of the beans, the thickness of the sauce, the balance of sweet and tangy flavors, it's all identical from can to can. The convenience factor cannot be overstated either, particularly in our increasingly busy modern lives. In a time when we're all busier than ever, juggling work and family and everything else, having a nutritious meal ready in 3 minutes flat is incredibly appealing. You don't need to plan ahead, you don't need special equipment or ingredients, you just need a can opener and a pot. Heinz Beanz are packed with protein, fiber, and essential nutrients too, making them a genuinely healthy option despite the relatively small amount of sugar and salt. They're actually one of your 5 a day. which is something a lot of people don't realize. Heinz Beanz went from being an American luxury import to a British cultural icon. It has had quite the journey over the past 135 years. Every day, over 100 tons of steel are transformed into cans filled with perfectly cooked beans in that secret sauce and sent out to feed millions of people. Whether you're having them for breakfast, lunch, or dinner, those beans represent more than a century of perfected technique and dedication to quality.